My parents stole my $60,000 business fund to back my sister's luxury skincare brand. So when they showed up a decade later begging me to raise her abandoned kids, I shut the door in their faces without saying a word. I checked the account at least twice a week. Every time that number crept up, I felt closer to making my dream a reality. My name's Joel. I'm 17 years old, and I live in Oak Ridge, North Carolina. I've been apprenticing at Dan's auto shop since I was 15. It's not glamorous, but it's honest. It's mine. Ever since I can remember, I've loved classic cars, the kind that roar instead of purr, the kind you have to touch with your own hands to understand. My dream? Open my own garage, specialize in full restorations, take rusted-out relics and bring them back to life. My grandpa got it. He used to restore old trucks in his barn back when I was a kid. When I turned 5, he opened an investment fund in my name, said it was for when the time comes. Every birthday, every Christmas, he'd add a little more. I started working part-time shifts as soon as I could, and I added to the fund myself. No video games, no parties, no impulse buys, just saving. The fund had reached 60 grand last I checked. $60,000. That money wasn't just for tools and rent. It was my future. It was proof that a blue-collar kid like me could build something of his own. Not everyone saw it that way, though. Alicia, my older sister, she always had different ideas. She was 22, fresh out of college, and obsessed with skincare, the expensive kind. Dreamed of launching her own luxury brand, something she claimed was sophisticated and on trend. She'd wrinkle her nose every time I came home with grease on my shirt. "You really want to smell like a tire for the rest of your life?" she'd ask, flipping her shiny hair over her shoulder like she was on camera. "Cars are dead, Joel, but you go ahead and play mechanic if it makes you happy." It didn't bother me much. She was all talk. I knew what I wanted, and I had my plan. And Mom and Dad? They always said they supported me. "We're proud of you, Joel," they'd say. "Just keep working hard." I believed them. But something shifted when Alicia came back from one of her networking trips in LA. She sat us down in the living room, her face glowing with excitement and something else I couldn't name. She said she'd met a huge influencer, someone with millions of followers. Claimed it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to partner on a skincare launch. "This is it," she said, eyes gleaming. "This is how we take the family name and elevate it." Elevate it? I didn't know what to say. I just sat there, clutching my phone. The bank app still open from earlier that day. My dream was right there, one deposit away from being real. But the way Mom and Dad looked at Alicia, like she had brought them a golden ticket, made my stomach twist. "I'll need startup capital," Alicia continued, casually, like she was talking about borrowing a lawnmower. "But once we go live, we're looking at 6 figures within 6 months." I thought they'd laugh. I thought they'd say, "That's a big risk." But instead, Dad leaned forward and said, "This could change everything." I left the room before I could hear anything else. Back in my room, I stared at my savings account. $60,000. Years of sacrifice, all leading up to this moment. And for the first time since I was 12, I felt a chill run through me. Like maybe this dream I built wasn't as safe as I thought. Like maybe, just maybe, someone else had already started planning what they'd do with it. A couple of days after Alicia's big announcement, the house changed. Mom started referring to the living room as the family conference space. Dad would toss around words like branding, capital structure, and legacy like he was born in a boardroom. The three of them would huddle at the table, flipping through marketing mock-ups Alicia had printed from some website, acting like they were launching the next Fortune 500. I stayed out of it, didn't say a word. Every free moment I wasn't working at Dan's, I was buried in paperwork for my business license. My plan was simple: open up my own garage on the east side of town, where the old transmission shop used to be. It had a roll-up door, 3 bays, and enough square footage for the restoration setup I dreamed about since middle school. I had the blueprints. I had the licensing forms, and I had the money. At least, I thought I did. One Friday afternoon, I swung by the bank after school. I needed to get a certified check made out to the landlord holding the property. He'd agreed to give me first dibs if I could get the deposit in by Monday. The teller recognized me. Her name was Sandra, a soft-spoken woman with a crooked name tag and an easy smile. "Joel, getting close to that goal, huh?" "Almost there," I said, grinning. She pulled up my account. Then her face dropped. Can you wait 1 second?" She got up and disappeared behind a frosted glass door. I stood there, confused, watching an older man in a tie come out a minute later. "Mr. Carter?" he asked. "Yeah, mind stepping into my office?" I sat down across from his desk, my palms already sweating. I hadn't done anything wrong, but something about the way he said "Mr. Carter" made me feel 10 years older. "I just need to confirm some things with you," he said, clicking away on his keyboard. "Your account, it's been active since your grandfather opened it." "Yes?" "Yeah. And your parents have joint custodianship?" "They did when I was a minor, but I'm 17 now. I thought that would be changing soon." He nodded slowly. "Right. Well, over the last 2 months, there have been a series of withdrawals, all authorized by your parents." My stomach clenched. Withdrawals. He turned the screen toward me. "Here's the transaction history." It was like watching a nightmare play out in real time. $10,000, then 5, then another 8, all labeled with vague descriptions: consultation, vendor advance, marketing materials. Dozens of entries. None of them mine. The total left in the account, $1,682.44. I stared at the number, blinking, trying to breathe. That's not right, I said. There should be over 60 grand in there. There was, he said quietly. But as long as your parents are joint custodians, they have legal access to the funds. I couldn't speak. I just sat there, the roar in my ears drowning everything out. Sandra offered me a water bottle when I left. I think she said sorry. I don't remember if I responded. By the time I got home, the house was empty. Mom's car was gone. So was Dad's. The table was still covered with swatches of packaging colors and influencer proposals. In the trash, I saw one of the envelopes from the bank. I pulled it out and read the statement again, line by line. Gone. Everything I'd saved. Every greasy hour under a busted car. Every dollar Grandpa had added to the account on birthdays. Every sacrifice. Every skipped hangout. Every patched-up pair of work jeans. All of it. Gone. And I hadn't even been asked. They didn't steal the money. That would have been cleaner. What they stole was worse. They stole my dream, buried it in skincare samples and vanity projects, and called it a family investment. I walked back to my room like a ghost, shut the door, sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the wall. That night, I didn't sleep. I just kept seeing the number, $1,682.44. That's all I had left, and nothing I built could survive on that. I waited until Sunday evening. Mom always made a roast on Sundays. I figured if I was going to confront them, it might as well be when they were sitting still, faces clean, pretending like we were still a normal family. The air in the house smelled like gravy and lies. I walked into the living room, holding the printed bank statement in my hand like a weapon. Alicia was already there, sitting cross-legged on the couch in a silk robe, tapping away on her phone. Dad was flipping through channels. Mom was lighting a candle on the coffee table. I stood in the middle of the room. We need to talk. They looked up, casual, unbothered, until I held up the paper. I went to the bank. Mom's smile faltered. Dad froze mid-click. Alicia didn't even look up. I waited a beat. I saw the withdrawals. A long silence settled over the room. Dad cleared his throat. Joel, look, we were going to eat. You took everything, I said, my voice quiet but sharp. Over $60,000. Gone. And no one thought to tell me. Mom sat forward, her hands clasped like she was preparing for a sermon. Sweetheart, please, don't be dramatic. It's not gone. It's been invested. Invested? I laughed once, a dry, bitter sound. Into what? Creams? Serums? Alicia finally looked up, her lips curling into a smirk. Into something with a real future. Not whatever you were planning with that car junkyard fantasy. That broke me. It wasn't a fantasy, I snapped. It was my plan, my garage, my life. Dad tried to stand, like he could calm the room by sheer presence. Joel, listen, you're 17. You've got your whole life ahead of you. This opportunity for your sister, it came at the right time. For the whole family. I stared at him, stunned. The whole family? You mean Alicia? She's got a real shot, Mom added, her voice pitching higher. This influencer has millions of followers. If the launch goes well, we're all going to benefit. Oh, I didn't ask for that. My voice cracked. I didn't agree to any of this. That account was never just yours, Alicia said, folding her arms. You think you earned 60 grand fixing tires after school? Grandpa and the parents kept that money growing for years. You should be grateful they even let you touch it. I turned to her, eyes burning. I didn't touch it. You did. Her expression sharpened. So now I'm the villain because I'm doing something meaningful with it? I laughed bitterly. Meaningful? You're slapping your name on overpriced lotion. Better than rolling around in oil all day with a bunch of rednecks, she muttered. Dad stepped between us. Enough. Joel, don't talk to your sister like that. I blinked. You're defending her? After she helped drain every dollar from the fund Grandpa started. He'd be proud, Mom said. He always said family came first. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So stealing from me is family now. Alicia scoffed. You're being selfish. All you care about is your little garage. This is about more than you. This brand could elevate us. Finally put our name on something that matters. I looked at her. This person who shared my blood, but not a single shred of understanding. You think my dream doesn't matter because it's not shiny? Because it doesn't come with followers and hashtags? No one said anything. I looked around at the people I used to call my family. They weren't shocked. They weren't even sorry. They were just annoyed that I was upset, that I was interrupting their plans with something as inconvenient as the truth. I felt it then, that cold break inside, like a bone snapping in slow motion. Fine, I said. Keep it. Every dollar. I hope your creams go viral and you sell out by Christmas. Joel, Mom started, her voice suddenly soft, performative. No, I cut her off. I'm done. I turned and walked out. Alicia called after me, sarcastic. Don't forget your socket wrench. But I didn't look back. I grabbed my backpack from my room, filled it with the basics. Phone charger, toothbrush, spare shirt, left the rest behind. By the time I stepped outside, the roast was still steaming on the table. They didn't follow. No one tried to stop me. They'd already taken what they needed, and I was just another thing they left behind. I crashed at my friend Malik's place that first night. He lived in a one-bedroom basement apartment on the south side, just a 10-minute walk from the tire shop, where I'd picked up weekend shifts for almost 2 years. His couch sagged in the middle, and the whole place smelled faintly of weed and fried bologna. But it was warm and quiet, two things I didn't have anymore. You sure, man? Malik asked, tossing me a spare blanket. You don't gotta explain, but I'm good, I said, setting my backpack down. Just need a couple days to figure things out. He didn't push. That was mid-November. A couple days turned into months. I picked up as many shifts as the tire shop would give me. Nights, weekends, doubles when I could. When I wasn't patching sidewalls or flipping tires onto steel rims, I was delivering food for Spork, this new knockoff DoorDash app that paid a little better if you didn't mind the occasional sketchy customer or broken elevator. I didn't. I kept my head down, worked until my legs gave out, then did it again the next day. The dream, the garage, the logo I'd sketched in my notebook 100 times, the restored Chevelle I swore I'd flip by the time I turned 18, all of it went into a box in the back of my mind. I couldn't afford dreams anymore. I had bills. Malik wouldn't take rent, but I paid his Wi-Fi, covered groceries when I could, replaced his microwave when it finally died with a used one from a pawn shop. It wasn't much, but it made me feel like I wasn't just freeloading. I enrolled at Blue Valley Trade School part-time, paid for it with a combination of student loans and what little I had left in savings after the first few months of surviving. I figured if I couldn't open my own place, at least I'd sharpen my skills. Maybe get certified. Maybe one day, years from now, circle back to the dream, if there was anything left of it. My phone buzzed constantly in those first few weeks. Mom's name, Dad's, Alicia's, even a couple cousins I hadn't heard from since Grandpa's funeral. They all said the same things. This was just a misunderstanding. We didn't think you'd react like this. You're still young. You've got time to bounce back. Bounce back? Like they hadn't torched the thing I'd spent years building. I didn't answer. Not once. I changed the lock screen on my phone to a blank black background, removed their birthdays from my calendar, deleted the voice memos I'd saved of Grandpa telling stories about his first truck, just so I wouldn't cry when I accidentally tapped one. Alicia, of course, went silent in a different way through her social media. Flashy photos, filtered product shots, launch day energy, with a boomerang of her clinking champagne glasses at some influencer party in Charlotte. I watched it once, muted, in the break room at work, while wiping grease off my palms. The caption read, "Success is for the bold." I almost threw my phone across the locker room. I didn't comment, didn't like, didn't give her the satisfaction of knowing I saw. But the hurt? That stayed. It's one thing to lose money. It's another to be erased. They had moved on, like I'd never existed. Like the garage, the fund, the years of saving, none of it mattered because I wasn't on camera, sipping rose in a rented house. By spring, I dropped 10 pounds, grown a quiet callus over my entire life. My classmates knew me as the guy who finished assignments early and never talked. My manager at the tire shop offered me a full-time position once I got certified. It wasn't my dream, but it was steady. And Malik, he became my family. No lectures, no guilt, just a silent nod every time I got home late, and a fresh bowl of cereal waiting if he happened to be up. One night in April, I came home around 11, rain-soaked and dead on my feet. Malik handed me a beer without a word. We sat on the couch in silence for a while, watching some dumb reality show. Then he said, "You ever think about going back? To what? Your people." I shook my head. They stopped being my people the minute they chose Alicia's brand over my life. He didn't say anything after that. And honestly, he didn't need to. It was a Thursday evening. Rain was tapping the window in soft, steady beats, and I was halfway through a bowl of instant ramen when I heard the knock. Not a neighbor knock, not a delivery. This was slower, heavier, like someone unsure if they had the right to be there. I froze. Malik was at work. I wasn't expecting anyone. Another knock. 3 more, spaced apart like punctuation. I set the bowl down and opened the door. There stood Mom and Dad. Only they didn't look like the version I kept frozen in my mind, smug, satisfied, standing proudly beside Alicia's influencer light. They looked older, smaller, like the weight of time had finally started settling on their shoulders. Dad's cheeks were sunken. His once perfectly groomed hair had thinned out and turned the color of wet cardboard. Mom clutched her purse like it was the only thing anchoring her in the world. My first instinct was to shut the door, but I didn't. "Not yet, Joel," Mom said, her voice cracking. "Can we come in?" "No." She flinched. Dad cleared his throat, shifted uncomfortably. "We won't take much of your time," he said. We need to talk to you about Alicia." The name hit like a sudden drop in temperature. "She's gone," Mom said, as if the word explained everything. "Vanished." I didn't move. "Her business tanked," Dad added, looking past me, avoiding my eyes. "There was a scandal. Something about fake reviews, unpaid vendors." Then the influencer dropped her. Everything unraveled. "She left the kids," Mom whispered. 2 of them, a boy and a girl, 5 and 7. I blinked, barely absorbing the words. "She just disappeared," Dad continued. "No goodbye, no contact, nothing." And now Mom's voice broke. "Now we have them. And we're not young, Joel. We're not well. Your father's back is shot. I've got blood pressure issues." She stepped forward slightly, hand trembling as she reached into her purse and pulled out a photo. 2 little faces, wide eyes, confused smiles. I didn't take it. "Joel," she whispered, "you're their uncle. Their blood." My jaw clenched. Dad finally looked at me. "We don't know what else to do." I stared at them for a long moment. All the nights I'd slept on a basement floor. The sound of Alicia laughing behind a champagne glass while I pulled 16-hour shifts. The bank account with its $60,000 promise turned into face cream and hashtags. And now they were standing here. Not for me. Not to apologize. But to ask again. To ask for more. "I listened to you," I said finally, my voice low. I stayed quiet while you all drained everything I had. I walked out with nothing because I thought silence would keep me from hating you. They didn't interrupt. They just looked hollow, tired. Now you're here, I continued, because your golden child finally cracked under the weight of her own vanity. And you want me to clean it up, Joel? Mom pleaded. Please. They're innocent. They need someone. So did I said flatly. When you took everything. Dad opened his mouth, but I didn't let him speak. I can't forget, I said. I can't feel it. The betrayal. The silence. The way you looked at me like I was just a backup plan. Another beat of silence passed. Then I stepped back and closed the door. Not hard. Not in anger. Just with finality. Behind me, the apartment was warm and quiet. The ramen had gone cold, but I didn't care. I sat down on the couch and stared at the floor. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't cruelty. This was the first time I chose myself. And I didn't flinch. They didn't knock again, but they didn't go away either. That night, I got 5 voicemails, all from Mom. Her voice grew more desperate with each message. At first, it was calm. Joel, I know you're angry, but we just need to talk. By the third, she was sobbing. You don't understand what it's like. We're not cut out to raise little kids again. The 5th one was nearly a whisper. They cry at night. They ask for her. I didn't listen to the rest. I deleted them, but I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing their faces, not Mom and Dad. The kids. I didn't even know their names. 2 tiny humans dragged into chaos they didn't cause. Abandoned by a mother who'd once mocked me for having dreams that got my hands dirty. The guilt snuck in, slow and sharp. I'd built walls to survive. But now, those same walls were echoing every time I tried to convince myself I didn't care. I'd walk into the kitchen and stop at the drawer where I kept a photo of Grandpa. I'd think about what he'd say. Probably something like, blood's blood, but loyalty's earned. He was old school that way. Still, I could hear his voice just under the silence, asking me if I'd want to be the kind of man who leaves kids behind the way their mother did. I hated that it got to me. I hated that I still had a heart big enough for them to twist. Even Malik noticed. One night, we were eating on the couch, watching reruns, and he turned down the volume. You okay? He asked. Yeah, liar. I exhaled. They came by. He nodded. I figured. They want me to help with Alicia's kids. He didn't say anything for a minute, just sat with it. You gonna? I shrugged. I don't know. And that was the truth. The next morning, I got a text from my cousin Sandra. I hadn't heard from her in years. She used to babysit us when Alicia and I were little. Sandra, hey, just wanted you to know your parents are struggling. I know what they did was wrong, but those kids don't deserve to get caught in the middle. I stared at the message for a long time. Later that afternoon, I opened my inbox. 12 new emails. 9 of them from Mom, 1 from Dad, 2 from Sandra, all with subject lines like, please, don't ignore this. And they're not her. I couldn't read them. Instead, I walked to the closet, grabbed my old backpack, and pulled out the folder of business license papers I never threw away. I laid it on the kitchen table, just stared at it. It felt like a message from a different life, a life that hadn't been burned to the ground by family greed. That night, I dreamed I was in my garage, my own garage, standing in front of a half-restored '69 Mustang. The engine gleamed. The walls were lined with tools I'd saved for one by one. There was music playing in the background, low and scratchy. Grandpa's laugh echoed from somewhere behind me, and then I woke up, back in the basement apartment, lights off, empty. I sat up and rubbed my face. The guilt wasn't gone. It probably never would be. But neither was the memory of what they'd done, how they'd left me with nothing, how they'd only remembered me when they needed someone to mop up Alicia's mess. The kids were blameless, but so was I, and I was done paying for everyone else's decisions. The call came 2 weeks later. It was Aunt Carla, Dad's older sister, the one who used to send me $20 on my birthday when I was a kid, and then never speak to me the rest of the year. I hadn't heard from her in ages, which meant one thing. The family was officially desperate. I let it go to voicemail. An hour later, she called again. This time, I picked up. Joel, she said, without so much as a hello. This has gone too far. I leaned back on the couch, letting the silence fill the space between us. You've made your point, she continued. You're angry. We get it. But this isn't just about you anymore. Your parents are drowning. They're too old to be raising kids again. And those children, they're not my responsibility, I said, cutting her off. Blood is blood, Joel, she snapped. You're acting like a stranger, like some cold. That's when it all snapped loose. No, I said, sitting up. No, you don't get to call me cold. Not after everything. Joel? You want to talk about family? Where were all of you when they drained 60 grand from my account, huh? When they ripped apart the one thing I'd worked for since I was 12 and gave it to Alicia like it was her birthright? The line went quiet. Do you know what it felt like to walk into that bank and see that my future was gone? To have my own mother cry for my sister while telling me I was young and adaptable? To be told by Alicia that my dreams didn't matter because they weren't pretty enough? Joel, we all make mistakes. No, I growled. You all watched and said nothing. You nodded along while they stole from me. And now that it's blown up in your faces, suddenly I'm supposed to come back? Play the hero? Be the patch for a boat you all poked holes in? I know you're hurt, Carla said, quieter now. But this anger, it's not healthy. I laughed. A low, bitter sound. This isn't anger, I said. This is survival. She tried again. What about the kids? I feel sorry for them, I said honestly. They didn't ask for any of this. But they have grandparents and social services. And maybe, just maybe, they'll have a better shot at life if they're raised by someone who doesn't treat people like disposable income. A pause. You're really not going to help? No, I said. And if anyone from the family contacts me again about this, I'll file for legal protection. There was silence on the line, a thick, heavy silence that felt like the door slamming shut on a decade of damage. I hope someday you can forgive us, she said, voice trembling. I already have, I replied. That's why I'm walking away. And I hung up. My hands were shaking, but my heart was still. It didn't feel triumphant. It didn't feel like revenge. It just felt like peace. A hard, painful, necessary peace. And for the first time since everything had been stolen from me, I knew exactly where I stood. On my own, but whole. 2 years passed. I moved out of Malik's basement, got my own apartment on the other side of Durham. It wasn't fancy. 1 bedroom, no balcony, and the heat clanked like a haunted pipe organ in the winter, but it was mine. My name was on the lease. My tools were lined up in the hall closet. My future, rebuilt from nothing, was back in my hands. I worked logistics for a regional motor company now. Nothing glamorous, mostly managing parts orders and dispatching supply routes. But it was steady, paid better than the shop, gave me time in the evenings to keep tinkering. I bought a rusted-out '66 Impala off a guy in Wilson, and I was slowly restoring it piece by piece. I didn't think about them much anymore. Some nights, I did. Quiet moments when the TV was off, and I caught myself wondering if the kids were okay, if they remembered me, if they even knew I existed. But mostly, I trained my brain to move on. Then one Saturday afternoon, I stopped by a grocery store near my new place, one I hadn't been in before. I was pushing my cart down the baking aisle when I heard my name. Joel? I turned and saw her Clarissa, a distant cousin on Dad's side. We hadn't spoken since Grandpa's funeral. Hey, I said, blinking. Wow, been a minute. She gave a tight smile, the kind people wear when they're not sure if they should be excited or ashamed. Have you been? She asked, eyeing me like I might disappear if she blinked. Good, I said, nodding. Real good. She hesitated, then blurted. You heard what happened, right? I paused, my hand halfway to a box of cornbread mix. About your folks and Alicia. I said nothing, just waited. She shifted uncomfortably. It got real bad after you left. Alicia's brand completely collapsed. She burned a ton of bridges, owed people money. She was staying with some guy in Atlanta for a while, then just vanished. No one's seen her since. I stayed quiet. Your mom and dad, they lost the house. They tried to keep it up while raising the kids, but it all fell apart. Medical bills, utilities, debt collectors. Your dad had a stroke last year. That one hit me harder than I expected. I didn't flinch, but something twisted behind my ribs. Clarissa looked down at her hands, fingers tied on the shopping cart. The kids went into foster care. There was an investigation. Something about neglect, missed appointments. I don't know all the details, but yeah, they're with a family in Greensboro now. Seem okay, from what I hear. I nodded once, not because it made sense, because it didn't, but because I didn't know what else to do with the weight suddenly in my chest. They shouldn't have done what they did, she said softly. It wasn't right. You were always the one with your head on straight. I looked at her, and then I just said, thanks, and walked away. I didn't rush. I didn't cry. I finished my shopping in silence, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like a memory trying to break back in. Later that night, I sat on the floor of my apartment, the Impala's new carburetor laid out in front of me, tools spread like old friends across the rug. I thought about those kids, about Alicia, about how my parents once looked at me like a backup plan and still couldn't understand why I walked away. I mourned it all, not with tears, but with stillness. Because that's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't scream forever. Eventually, it just sits in the corner of your life like an old scar. It stops bleeding, but it never really disappears. And as I tightened the bolt on that carburetor, I realized something. They'd lost everything they stole from me, and I'd rebuilt everything they tried to take. Not revenge, just balance and peace. Real, honest peace. Finally,